started like any other Monday night in Burlington, Vermont. A young couple, Paul Robinson and Carrie Duane, were just wrapping up dinner and drinks at a quirky local restaurant, enjoying the warm summer air. But within hours, an ordinary night turned into the unimaginable. A quiet apartment, a slightly ajar bedroom door, and a chilling whisper from across the hallway. Something is wrong with Rita. What followed would become Vermont's oldest unsolved homicide, a mystery that haunted generations. Until 2023, when a cigarette butt, long buried in an evidence box, finally gave up its secret. This is the case of Rita Curran, the murder no one could solve until half a century later. Rita Curran was 24 years old in the summer of 1971. A second-grade teacher at Milton Elementary School and the youngest child of Thomas and Mary Curran, Rita had just moved into her very first apartment on Brooks Avenue, a quiet street near the University of Vermont campus. Born in Brooklyn but raised in Vermont, Rita was known for her gentle spirit, her love of music, and a deep connection to her family. She sang in choirs, performed in barbershop quartets, and spent her summers taking university classes and working as a chambermaid at a local motel. She was reserved, thoughtful, and kept close ties to her hometown of Milton, just a short drive away. When she answered a roommate ad in the Burlington Free Press, Rita moved in with two young women, Carrie Duane and Beverly Lanfer. A fourth resident, Carrie's boyfriend Paul, shared the second bedroom. They weren't close friends yet. Rita was still adjusting to life away from home. But no one could have imagined how short that independence would be. On the night of July 19th, 1971, Rita Curran returned home after a barbershop quartet practice. Like any other night, she slipped into her pajamas and housecoat, carefully placed curlers in her hair, and prepared for bed. Her roommates, Paul and Carrie, were out at the Harbor Hideaway, a local restaurant just across town. Around 11:15 p.m., they decided to call back to the apartment and invite the others out for a drink. Beverly answered. Rita, already asleep, was left behind as Beverly joined the others. By 12:30 a.m., Paul and Carrie decided to call it a night. They left the bar and headed home. Beverly stayed out a little longer. When Paul and Carrie walked back into the apartment, they noticed Rita's bedroom door was slightly open, but the room was silent. Nothing seemed out of place, just quiet. They waited for Beverly to return, and once she did, the three of them sat in the living room, chatting briefly before heading to bed. Moments later, a voice echoed from the hallway. Beverly had stepped into the bedroom she shared with Rita, and then she said it. Something is wrong with Rita. What they found inside that room would shatter the lives of everyone who knew Rita Curran. The Burlington Fire Department ambulance was the first to arrive, followed by Officer Richard Garrow of the Burlington Police Department. Inside the bedroom, the young woman was found lying on her back, lifeless. Rita Curran had been beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled. She was nude, her clothing torn and left between her legs. Her face was bruised, her hair curlers scattered across the floor. Signs of a violent struggle were everywhere. The bed had been pushed away from the wall, the curtains torn from their rods. In her hand, Rita clutched strands of hair, likely her attackers. Detectives collected everything: fingernail scrapings, bed linens, her nightgown, and a cigarette butt found under her elbow. It was a Lark brand, unusual, because no one in the apartment smoked that type. It hadn't been crushed or snuffed out. It had simply burned out on the floor. Outside the home, investigators looked for signs of forced entry. A shed-like vestibule by the back door held a tipped-over trash can, and a second can bent as if stepped on. A window near the front was unlocked but hard to open. Blood was smeared on a door leading back into the kitchen. Back inside, the scene suggested the attacker knew the layout. or at least had taken the risk of entering quietly. And more troubling, the apartment hadn't been locked. Paul later admitted to propping open the storm door with a trash can. None of the roommates regularly used locks. The chain on the front door had been broken for some time. Detectives interviewed all 3 roommates, and by morning, dozens of officers canvassed the neighborhood. Upstairs, neighbors William and Michelle DeRoos told police they'd heard nothing. Michelle said she'd been awake at 1 a.m., right in the window of the attack. But she reported nothing unusual. An autopsy revealed Rita's cause of death: asphyxia by manual strangulation. She had fought back, but her attacker had overpowered her. The estimated time of death was between 11:20 p.m. and 12:30 a.m. A narrow, 70-minute window. Detectives worked relentlessly. They tested fingerprints, collected soil samples, and even sent physical evidence to the FBI. Leads were chased across state lines. Over a dozen suspects were identified, questioned, and in some cases, polygraphed. But nothing stuck. The case went cold. Decades passed. Detectives retired. Rita's parents went to their graves, never knowing who had taken their daughter's life. But her family never stopped hoping. In 2019, nearly 50 years after Rita Curran was murdered, Burlington police reopened the case. Lieutenant J.T. Trieb led the renewed investigation, determined to treat it as if the crime had happened yesterday. And in many ways, it had never really gone cold, because the evidence had been meticulously preserved. The focus? That one small clue found beneath Rita's elbow in 1971, the Lark cigarette butt. Back in 2014, DNA had already been extracted from the cigarette. It was male, not a match to any of the original roommates or responding officers, not in the National CODIS database, but it was enough to exclude 13 potential suspects. Still, no hit, no name, no justice. In 2022, the department turned to familial DNA searching, a tool made famous by cases like the Golden State Killer. They partnered with Parabon nanolabs, and genealogist C.C. Moore began reverse engineering the family tree of the unknown suspect. Using public DNA databases like GED Match and Family Tree DNA, Moore tracked the DNA through distant cousins, working her way backward through generations. One name emerged, a man who had lived in the very building where Rita was killed: William Richard DeRoos. He had been interviewed by police back in 1971, twice. He and his wife Michelle had claimed they were home that night, providing each other an airtight alibi. But now, that alibi was starting to crack. Police tracked down a living relative, DeRoos's half-brother, and with his consent, collected a DNA sample. The results were undeniable. The probability that the unknown male DNA from the cigarette butt was William DeRoos's half-brother? Over 97%, but investigators needed more. They located DeRoos's ex-wife, Michelle, and asked her 5 decades later to revisit that night. And this time, she told the truth. She admitted that William wasn't home during the window when Rita was murdered. They had argued, and he went out for a cool-down walk. He told her to lie because of his criminal record, and she did. Now, 50 years later, that lie was finally unraveling. In February 2023, Rita Curran's siblings, Thomas and Mary, met with detectives from the Burlington Police Department. They were finally told what no one could tell them for over half a century: who killed their sister. The case was officially closed. The department held a press conference announcing that William Richard DeRoos, a man who lived just 2 floors above Rita, was, with certainty, the sole perpetrator of her murder. He had slipped out of his apartment under the cover of darkness, attacked a young woman he didn't know, and left behind almost no trace, except for the cigarette he'd smoked inside her room. A single careless detail, preserved for decades, and it was enough. William DeRoos would never face trial. He died in San Francisco in 1986 from a drug overdose. He had lived the rest of his life free, while Rita's family lived in grief and unanswered questions. But now, finally, they had the truth. Rita's brother and sister released a statement. 50 years is a long time to grieve, a long time to hope, but we never stopped. We were Curran strong, for each other and for Rita. They had long feared her story might be forgotten, but now, with answers and accountability, her name was back in the public light, not just as a victim, but as a daughter, a teacher, a singer, a friend. In the end, justice came not through a confession, but through science, determination, and the work of investigators who refused to let the file stay closed. What began with a whispered fear in the middle of the night, something is wrong with Rita, would finally end in a long-awaited truth. Because someone did know what happened that night. And even if it took 50 years, the truth never stopped waiting to be found.